A poor girl walked into court and said, "My dad is innocent, and I can prove it." No one expected what she pulled from her backpack. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. My father's hands were never made for violence. I remember them most clearly from when I was small, rough palms, calloused from years of construction work, but gentle when they braided my hair or fixed my broken toys. Those hands built houses for other people, laid bricks that would stand for generations, framed walls that families would paint and decorate and call home. Those same hands were now cuffed in steel, resting on a table in a courthouse, while 12 strangers decided whether he would spend the rest of his life in prison. My name is Maya Torres. I'm 17 years old, and this is the story of how I saved my father's life with nothing but a backpack and the truth. Before it started 14 months ago, on a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday. Dad came home from work at 6:30, same as always, smelling of sawdust and sweat. Mom was making arroz con pollo in our tiny kitchen. I was doing homework at the dining table, the one Dad had built from scrap wood when we couldn't afford to buy one new. We were poor. Not the kind of poor that makes the news, but the kind that means you count pennies at the grocery store and pray the car doesn't break down because there's no money for repairs. Dad worked construction 6 days a week. Mom cleaned houses. I had a scholarship to Jefferson High, the good school across town, but I still wore my uniform 2 years past when I'd outgrown it because we couldn't afford a new one. But we were happy. That mattered more than anything. The knock on the door came at 7:15, right as we were sitting down to eat. 3 police officers. One held a warrant. They said Dad had to come with them. They said there'd been a fire at a building site downtown, the Riverside Development Project, a luxury apartment complex Dad's crew had been working on. They said someone had set it deliberately. They said they had evidence pointing to my father. "That's impossible," Mom said, her voice high and thin with panic. "Carlos was here. He came home at 6:30, like always." "Ma'am, we need you to step back," one officer said. They put handcuffs on my father, right there in our living room, in front of the dinner Mom had spent 2 hours making, in front of me, standing frozen by the table. Dad looked at me before they took him away. His eyes said, "It's going to be okay. Don't be scared." But I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been. They led him out to a police car while our neighbors watched from windows and doorways. Mrs. Chen from next door, the Rodriguez family across the street, Mr. Park from the corner unit, all of them watching, whispering, already deciding he was guilty. The door closed behind the officers, and Mom collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. The arroz con pollo went cold on the table. The fire at the Riverside Development had caused $3 million in damage. The building was nearly complete 16 stories of luxury apartments that would rent for prices our entire neighborhood couldn't afford in a year. Someone had set fire to the 3rd floor, and it had spread quickly through the construction materials still on site. No one died, thank God. But the developer, a man named Marcus Hendricks, wanted blood. He wanted someone to pay. He wanted someone to blame. And they blamed my father. The evidence seemed damning. Dad's fingerprints on a can of accelerant found at the scene. Security footage showing someone in a jacket like Dad's entering the building after hours. A testimony from another construction worker who claimed Dad had complained about working conditions and threatened to burn it all down if things didn't improve. The public defender assigned to Dad's case was a tired-looking woman named Ms. Patterson, who juggled 40 other cases and barely had time to meet with us. She told us the truth in flat, emotionless terms. The evidence was strong, the prosecutor was motivated, and Dad's best bet was to take a plea deal. If he pleads guilty, he might get 7 to 10 years instead of 20 to life, she said, not meeting our eyes. I know it's not what you want to hear, but it's the reality. He didn't do it, I said. Ms. Patterson looked at me like I was a child who still believed in fairy tales. I understand this is hard, but sometimes the best outcome isn't innocence, it's minimizing damage. He didn't do it. She gathered her papers, clearly done with this conversation. The trial is in 2 months. I'll do what I can, but you need to prepare yourselves. After she left, Dad sat at our kitchen table with his head in his hands. Maybe she's right, he said quietly. Maybe I should take the deal. 7 years? You'd be 24 when I got out. You could have your life back. No, I said fiercely. We're going to prove you're innocent. Maya, sweetheart, we can't afford a better lawyer. We can't afford investigators or experts or any of the things we'd need. Then I'll do it myself. Mom and Dad both looked at me. You're 17, Mom said gently. This isn't a TV show. You can't just solve a crime. I can try. Baby, I can try. My voice cracked. I can't just sit here and let them take you for something you didn't do. I can't. So I'm going to try. Dad's eyes filled with tears. He reached across the table and took my hand. Okay, he whispered. Okay, mija, we try. Investigation, I started with the basics. The fire had happened on a Wednesday night at 11:47 p.m. Dad had been home by then. He'd watched the news with Mom and gone to bed at 10:30. I'd heard them talking through the thin walls of our apartment, heard Dad complaining about his sore back, heard them turn off the TV and say goodnight. But the prosecutor said the security footage showed someone entering the building at 11:15 p.m. Someone in a jacket like Dad's, with a build like Dad's, carrying something that could have been the accelerant. I needed to see that footage. Ms. Patterson had given us copies of the evidence-basic discovery materials. I spent hours watching the grainy security video on our old laptop, squinting at the pixelated figure moving through the construction site. The person was the right height, the right build. They wore a dark jacket with reflective strips, exactly like the safety jacket every construction worker on the site wore. Their face was hidden by the jacket's hood, but something was wrong. I watched the video over and over, making notes. The person walked with a limp, favoring their left leg. Dad didn't have a limp. The person carried the can of accelerant in their right hand. Dad was left-handed. I'd watched him work my entire life, watched him use tools, write notes, eat dinner. He did everything with his left hand. These were small things, probably not enough to convince a jury, but they were threads, and if I pulled them, maybe I could unravel the whole lie. Next, I looked at the fingerprints. Dad's prints were on the accelerant can. That was undeniable. But when had he touched it? The construction site used various chemicals and accelerants for different purposes: paint thinners, adhesives, cleaning solutions. Dad had worked there for 8 months. He could have touched that can dozens of times in the course of normal work. The prosecution's theory was that he'd taken it specifically for the arson. But what if he'd just touched it weeks before? What if someone else had used it after him, knowing his prints would already be on it? I needed to know more about the site, about who else had access, about who might want to frame my father. That's when I started skipping school. I'm not proud of it. My teachers called home. The principal sent letters. But Mom and Dad had bigger problems than my attendance, and I had work to do. I went to the construction site during the day, when the rebuilding had started. I wore my school uniform and carried a clipboard I'd bought at the dollar store, and I told people I was doing a project on construction safety. Most workers ignored me. A few talked to me, probably because I looked too young to be a threat. I learned about the crew, 15 men total, most of them immigrants like Dad, working long hours for modest pay. I learned about the foreman, a man named Doug Riley, who everyone said was an asshole but got results. I learned about Marcus Hendricks, the developer, who visited the site in expensive suits and complained about delays. And I learned about the insurance. One of the workers, a man named Juan, who knew my father, pulled me aside one day. "Your dad's a good man," he said in Spanish. "This whole thing is bullshit." "Do you know who really did it?" I asked. He looked around nervously. "I don't know anything, but I know Hendricks was pissed about the delays. We were 3 months behind schedule. Every day cost him money, and I know that building was insured for way more than it cost to build." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying sometimes fires happen at convenient times." He shook his head. "But I don't know anything. And even if I did, who'd believe a guy like me over a guy like Hendricks?" He walked away before I could ask more questions. Insurance fraud. The idea lodged in my brain like a splinter. What if Hendricks had set the fire himself, or paid someone to do it to collect the insurance money? What if Dad was just the convenient scapegoat, the immigrant worker with no money and no power, easy to blame? But I needed proof, and I had no idea how to get it. I spent weeks digging through everything I could find. I called the insurance company, pretending to be a student doing a project, and they told me nothing. I tried to get access to building permits and inspection reports at City Hall, but half the documents required permissions I didn't have. I haunted the public library, using their computers to search for anything about Hendricks, his business, his finances. I found a few interesting things. Hendricks had 2 previous projects that had gone over budget. He'd been sued 3 times by contractors claiming he hadn't paid them. He had a reputation for cutting corners and maximizing profits. But none of that proved he'd committed arson. The trial date got closer. 6 weeks. 4 weeks. 2 weeks. Dad was out on bail. Mom had borrowed money from everyone we knew to cover it, but he looked hollow, defeated. He'd stopped sleeping well, stopped eating. He spent his days sitting in our living room, staring at nothing. "Maybe I should just take the plea," he said one night. "No," I said. "Not yet. Please, Dad, not yet." "Mija, you've tried so hard, but sometimes the world doesn't care about the truth. Sometimes the world just wants someone to punish." "One more week," I begged. "Give me one more week." He looked at me with such sadness, such love. "One more week," he agreed. "Then I take the deal. I won't let this drag out and destroy you and your mother any more than it already has." That night, I lay in bed crying silently, feeling like I'd failed him, like I'd failed all of us. And then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're looking into the Riverside fire. Meet me at Miller's Diner tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone, I have information." My heart started racing. This could be a trap, could be someone trying to scare me off, could be anything, but it could also be the answer I'd been searching for. I texted back, "Who is this? Someone who knows the truth." 3 p.m. Don't tell anyone. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I deleted the messages and set an alarm for tomorrow. The Meeting Miller's Diner was a rundown place on the east side of town, the kind of restaurant that served breakfast all day and smelled permanently of grease and coffee. I got there at 2:45 p.m., my backpack heavy on my shoulders, my hands sweating despite the cool air. I ordered a Coke and sat in a booth by the window, watching every person who came through the door. At exactly 3 p.m., a man walked in. He was maybe 45, white, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He had a tired face and nervous eyes. He looked around the diner, spotted me, and walked over. "Maya Torres?" he said quietly. "Who are you?" He slid into the booth across from me. "My name's Daniel Reeves. I was the night security guard at the Riverside development, the one who was supposed to be on duty the night of the fire." I leaned forward. "Supposed to be?" "I was paid to take the night off." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Hendricks's foreman, Doug Riley, he came to me 3 days before the fire. Said there was going to be some sensitive work done that night, and it would be better if I wasn't around. He gave me $5,000 cash and told me to call in sick." "And you did?" "I did." He looked ashamed. "I got a kid with medical bills. $5,000. I couldn't turn it down. I thought maybe they were bringing in undocumented workers or something. I didn't know there was going to be a fire. But you knew it wasn't an accident. I knew something wasn't right. And then, when they arrested your dad, when I saw his face on the news, he swallowed hard. I knew they were setting him up, using him to cover what really happened. Why didn't you come forward? Because I'm scared. His voice rose, then dropped to a harsh whisper. Because Riley told me if I ever talked about that night, if I ever told anyone he paid me off, I'd disappear. And I believed him. I've got a family, kid. I've got a wife and a son. I can't. But you're here now, I said. You're telling me. Because I can't sleep at night. Because every time I close my eyes, I see your dad's face. Because this is wrong, and I can't live with being part of it anymore. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. But I can't testify. I can't put my family at risk. So I'm giving you this, and then I'm gone. You never saw me. We never met. Understand? What is it? Proof. He slid the envelope across the table. The $5,000 Riley gave me. I saved it. Didn't spend a penny. It's all here. And I recorded our conversation, the one where he told me to disappear that night. It's on a flash drive in the envelope. My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. Why would you record it? Insurance. In case they tried to throw me under the bus, too. I'm not a smart man, but I'm not that stupid. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a thick stack of bills and a small flash drive. The recording's clear, Daniel said. You can hear Riley explaining the whole setup. How Hendricks needed the insurance money, how they were going to make it look like an accident, how they needed a fall guy. Your dad's name isn't mentioned. I don't think they'd picked him yet, but the intent is clear. This could save him, I whispered. It could. Or it could get buried by expensive lawyers who know how to make evidence disappear. Daniel stood up. I hope you're smarter than I was. I hope you can do something with this. Because I'm done. I'm taking my family, and we're leaving town tonight. Good luck, kid. He walked out of the diner before I could thank him. I sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands. This was it. This was the proof I needed. But Daniel was right. If I just handed it to Ms. Patterson, it might disappear. Might get suppressed or dismissed or explained away. I needed to make sure the truth came out in a way that couldn't be ignored. I needed to bring it to court myself. The trial began on a gray Monday morning in November. I wore the same outfit I'd worn to Dad's arraignment, a hand-me-down dress that was too big for me, flats that pinched my feet. Mom wore her church clothes. Dad wore the one suit he owned, bought years ago for his citizenship ceremony. The courthouse was all marble floors and high ceilings, the kind of place designed to make people feel small. We walked through metal detectors, past security guards who looked at us like we were already guilty. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor. It smelled like old wood and anxiety. The gallery was mostly empty, a few reporters, some people I didn't recognize, and Marcus Hendricks sitting in the front row, looking confident in his expensive suit. Ms. Patterson met us outside. The prosecution's case is strong, she said bluntly. I'll do my best, but you need to prepare for a guilty verdict. Mr. Torres, it's not too late to accept the plea deal. No deal, Dad said firmly. He looked at me. We see this through. The judge entered, an older white woman named Judge Sandra Brennan, and everyone stood. The jury filed in. 12 faces, mostly older, mostly white, looking at my father with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed disgust. The prosecutor was a man named Richard Delgado. Hispanic, like us, which somehow made it worse. He stood and gave his opening statement with theatrical precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a simple case. The evidence will show that the defendant, Carlos Torres, deliberately set fire to the Riverside development on the night of October 15th, causing millions of dollars in damage. We have his fingerprints on the accelerant. We have security footage showing him entering the building. We have testimony from his co-workers about his anger and frustration. This was not an accident. This was arson, and the defendant must be held accountable. Ms. Patterson's opening statement was shorter, less confident. The evidence you will hear is circumstantial. My client is innocent. Thank you. I wanted to scream. The prosecution spent the next 3 hours laying out their case. They showed the security footage, the hooded figure walking with that slight limp. They brought in an expert who testified about the accelerant, about how the fire was definitely set deliberately. They called the construction worker who claimed Dad had made threats, though under cross-examination, he admitted he'd only heard it secondhand. Dad sat through it all with his hands folded, his face carefully neutral. But I could see the despair in his eyes. At lunch recess, Ms. Patterson pulled us aside. It's worse than I thought. That security footage is damning. And the fingerprints. I can't get around the fingerprints. What about alternate theories? I asked. What about investigating Hendricks? She looked at me tiredly. Maya, I understand you want to help, but conspiracy theories about rich developers aren't going to work here. We need to focus on poking holes in what they can prove, not making wild accusations we can't support. But, no buts. I know you mean well, but this is a courtroom, not a detective show. Please, just let me handle this. That's when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The afternoon session began with the defense's case. Ms. Patterson called character witnesses neighbors who said Dad was kind and honest, Mom who testified he'd been home the night of the fire, me who said my father would never hurt anyone. The prosecutor tore through it all in cross-examination. Isn't it true, Mrs. Torres, that you fell asleep before midnight that night? So you can't actually confirm where your husband was at 11:47 p.m., can you? Mom's eyes filled with tears. No, but... No further questions. It was hopeless. I could feel the jury already deciding, already seeing Dad as guilty. The system was a machine, and we were being ground up in it. Judge Brennan looked at her watch. Ms. Patterson, do you have any additional witnesses? No, Your Honor. The defense rests. Very well. We'll break for the day and reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. People started standing, gathering their things. Dad's shoulders slumped in defeat. Mom was crying quietly. I stood up, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, and walked toward the front of the courtroom. Excuse me, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Excuse me, Your Honor? Judge Brennan looked up, surprised. Yes? Court is adjourned, young lady. I know, but I have new evidence. Evidence that proves my father is innocent. The courtroom went silent. The judge frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? I'm Maya Torres. I'm the defendant's daughter. I walked through the gate that separated the gallery from the attorney's area. A bailiff moved to stop me, but Judge Brennan held up a hand. Ms. Patterson, the judge said, is this one of your witnesses? Ms. Patterson looked as confused as everyone else. No, Your Honor, I'm not a witness, I interrupted. I'm just someone who found the truth, and I can prove my father didn't set that fire. Mr. Delgado stood up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense has rested. The girl can't just walk in and... The girl is standing right here, I said, my voice getting stronger. And I have evidence, real evidence, the kind that shows exactly who set that fire and why they framed my father for it. Judge Brennan studied me for a long moment. I held her gaze, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This is unusual, she said finally, but I'm curious. Approach the bench, all of you. Ms. Torres, bring your evidence. I walked forward, Miss Patterson and Mr. Delgado flanking me, both looking furious for different reasons. The judge leaned forward. What exactly do you have? She asked. I set my backpack on her bench and opened it, pulled out the envelope Daniel Reeves had given me. I have $5,000 in cash that was used to bribe the security guard to leave his post the night of the fire, I said. And I have a recording of the construction foreman, Doug Riley, explaining the whole plan. How Marcus Hendricks needed the insurance money, how they were going to stage the arson, how they needed someone to blame for it. The judge's eyes widened. Mr. Delgado's face went pale. Let me see that, Judge Brennan said. I handed her the flash drive. It's all here, Your Honor. Everything you need to know that my father is innocent, that he was just convenient, just someone they could blame because he doesn't have money or power or anyone to defend him. Your Honor, I object, Mr. Delgado said, but his voice shook. This evidence hasn't been authenticated. We don't know where it came from or if it's even real. The girl could have fabricated. I didn't fabricate anything. I turned to face him. My father is innocent, and you know it. You've known it all along. But it's easier to convict a poor construction worker than to go after a rich developer. It's easier to destroy my family than to do your job and find the truth. That's enough, Judge Brennan said, but not unkindly. She looked at the flash drive in her hand. I'm going to listen to this recording in chambers, right now. Mr. Delgado, Ms. Patterson, you'll both accompany me. Everyone else, remain seated. They disappeared into the judge's chambers. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I walked back to where Mom and Dad were sitting. Dad pulled me into a hug, his whole body shaking. What did you do, mija? He whispered. I found the truth, I said, just like I promised. We waited for 45 minutes. It felt like 45 years. Finally, the door to chambers opened. Judge Brennan came out first, her face unreadable. Then Miss Patterson, looking shocked. Then Mr. Delgado, looking like he might be sick. Court is back in session, Judge Brennan said. The bailiff called for order. Everyone sat. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. I've reviewed the evidence presented by Ms. Maya Torres, the judge said. Her voice was calm but hard. The recording is clear and compelling. It features Doug Riley, the construction foreman at the Riverside Development, explaining a plan to commit insurance fraud through arson and discussing the need to find a scapegoat to blame for the crime. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. In the front row, Marcus Hendricks had gone white. Furthermore, the judge continued, the cash presented as evidence bears serial numbers that can be traced. Mr. Delgado has confirmed that this will require immediate investigation. She turned to look at my father. Mr. Torres, based on this new evidence, I'm declaring a mistrial. All charges against you are dismissed without prejudice, pending the results of a full investigation into Marcus Hendricks and Doug Riley for conspiracy to commit arson and insurance fraud. The courtroom exploded. Reporters jumped up. People started shouting. The bailiff called for order. But I only heard one thing, Dad's sob of relief beside me. Judge Brennan wasn't finished. She pointed her gavel at Mr. Delgado. As for you, counselor, I want a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning, explaining how your office filed charges, without thoroughly investigating all parties with motive and opportunity. This is unacceptable. Then she looked at me. Young lady, what you did was brave, and frankly, should never have been necessary. Our system failed your father. I'm sorry for that. But you didn't fail him. You saved him. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. After the rest happened quickly, Marcus Hendricks was arrested that evening, along with Doug Riley. The investigation uncovered exactly what Daniel Reeves had described, a plan to burn the building for insurance money, with my father selected as the perfect patsy. The local news covered it extensively. Young girl saves father from wrongful conviction. Teenager uncovers insurance fraud scheme. Daughter's love brings down developer's empire. I didn't care about any of that. I only cared that Dad was free. We went home that night, all three of us, and Mom made arroz con pollo. We sat at the table Dad had built, and we ate, and we cried, and we laughed. We were together. We were whole. We had survived. I'm so proud of you, Dad said, holding my hand across the table. So proud I can barely breathe. I just did what needed to be done, I said. No, he shook his head. You did what most people wouldn't have the courage to do. You stood up to a system designed to crush people like us. You fought when everyone else said to give up. You believed when I'd stopped believing in myself. I never stopped believing in you, Dad. I know, mija, I know, and that belief saved my life. 6 months later, Marcus Hendricks and Doug Riley were both convicted of arson and insurance fraud. Hendricks got 15 years, Riley got 12. The city settled with my father for wrongful prosecution. Not a lot, certainly not enough to make up for what we'd been through, but enough to pay off Mom's debts and give me a college fund. I graduated from Jefferson High with honors. I got accepted to State University on a full scholarship. I'm studying criminal justice now, with plans to go to law school, because I learned something during those months of investigation, during that moment in the courtroom, when I opened my backpack and pulled out the truth. I learned that the system doesn't care about people like us. Not really. We're too poor, too powerless, too easy to ignore. But I also learned that the system can be challenged, that truth has power. That one person, even a 17-year-old girl with a backpack and a borrowed dress can, make a difference if she refuses to give up. I walked into that courtroom and said, "My father is innocent, and I can prove it." And nobody expected what I pulled from my backpack. Nobody expected that a poor girl could bring down a rich man's empire with nothing but evidence and courage. Nobody expected that love could be stronger than power. But it was. It is. It always will be. Today is Sunday. Dad and I are building a bookshelf in my dorm room. He insisted on making it himself rather than buying one from the store. His hands move with practiced precision, measuring twice, cutting once, fitting pieces together with the skill of decades of experience. Those hands were never made for violence. They were made for building, for creating, for loving, for holding his daughter's hand when the world tried to tear their family apart. I watch him work, and I think about that moment in the courtroom, about the weight of the backpack on my shoulders, about the judge's surprised expression, about Dad's sob of relief. "You okay, Mika?" Dad asks, noticing me watching. "Yeah," I say, smiling. "I'm perfect." He smiles back and goes back to his work. Building, always building, because that's what we do. We build. We survive. We fight for truth. And sometimes, when the world tries to destroy us, we pull out our backpacks and prove them wrong.